Hello, and today we're discussing 3.2, how to find the slope between 2 points. So yesterday we talked about how slope is the rise over the run, or the change in y over the change in x, which you might remember me writing as this, change in y over change in x, right? Those triangles just mean change in. So when we're trying to find the slope between 2 points, we do the same exact thing. We have 2 points, we find what's my change in my y values, how are those changing, and what's my change in my x values. So this equation here is really just the same thing as change in y over change in x. So that's the equation for slope, is this guy right here. To find the slope between 2 points, you take the y values and subtract, and you take the x values and subtract, because what you're trying to do is find how much it's changing between those x and y values. Put it in a fraction and simplify just like we did yesterday. We're going to do 2 examples. I am going to show you 2 different ways that you can do it. The first way I'll show you is how to use the equation from right here. And the second way is the way that you'll see me to do it pretty much here on out, which is to just find the change in y, find the change in x, and put it as a fraction. I feel like it makes a lot more sense, and my students remember it better and make fewer mistakes. You are welcome to use the formula, but if I see you start making a lot of mistakes with your subtraction, especially when it comes to negatives, then I'm gonna be like, hold up a second, let's not do this anymore. Okay, so number 1, we're going to use the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, because the slope is the change in y over the change in x. And on my little points, I'll label, okay, this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2, and now I'm just gonna plug those points in. So on the top of the fraction, I will put my y's. So I'm gonna do 7 minus 5 because it's y2 minus y1 over 5 minus -3. And this is why you have to be really careful. You have to start with the same points. You have to, if you're subtracting a negative, you do have to put 2 minus signs. So 5 minus -3 is what that says. That gets you 2 over, okay, 5 minus -3 is the same thing as adding. So this is really 5 plus 3, which is 8. That's the kind of stuff my students get really confused on, and that's why I don't normally do this. If it makes sense to you though, that's fine. I can simplify this fraction by dividing both the top and the bottom by 2, so that my final answer for my slope is 1/4. Okay, so that's how you use the formula. You write down what's my x1, y1, x2, y2, subtract the y's on the top, the x's on the bottom, and then simplify. So now I'll do the second option, which is to just figure out how is the y changing and how are the x's changing. All right, let me zoom in. So here's my 2 points. I'm gonna start with the y's. Okay, let's think about a number line. To go from -8 to -11, what happens on a number line? It goes down 3, right? -3. To go from -8 to -11, it subtracts 3. So that's my change in y, is -3. Because I'm looking at my y values here, and if you need to label them like x1, y1, x2, y2, you can. You don't really have to. Okay, now I'm gonna look at my x values. To go from 2 to 5, on a number line, to go from 2 to 5, I add 3. So that's my change in x. Now I just put that as a fraction. My slope is the change in y over the change in x. So now just take those two numbers and put them in the fraction. Those numbers, my change in y went down 3. My change in x went up 3. So now I simplify. -3 divided by +3 is -1. And you're done. So I feel like that's a heck of a lot faster than the formula, which is why you'll see me do it. You can use a formula, but you have to be really careful with your negatives. And I'll be honest, most of the times my students are not careful. So I would really prefer that you do it this way, just because I feel like I see a lot more success. And I might even like show you. So this is option 1. You could do the same thing here, right? My change in y was +2. My change in x was +8. Whoops. Then I put that in a fraction. So much faster. 2/8 is 1/4. So I feel like it's just way quicker to get the slope. Now let's talk about what it means to be 0 or undefined. You guys remember Slope Dude from yesterday told you that if a line is horizontal, it has a slope of 0. If a line is vertical, it has a slope of undefined. Now when we're talking about 2 points, if you end up with something like this, where it's 0 over some number, then it's going to be equal to 0. If, however, it's a number over 0, then it is not possible, and then you say undefined. So my fancy way of remembering this, and I have a poster of this on my wall. This way is okay. This way is no. You can do 0 divided by something. You can't do a number divided by 0, which is why we say undefined. Okay, let's do these two. These are obviously going to be special ones. Find the rate of change through the given points from 4, 5 to 4, -3. Okay, my change in y. When I go from 5 to -3, I subtract 8. So that's my change in y. To go from 4 to 4, nothing happens, so 0. So my change in y over my change in x is -8 over 0. Not possible. You cannot divide by 0, so then you have to say for me undefined. So this actually ends up being 2 points on a vertical line. Okay, one more. Again, let's find our change in y values first. Change of 0 from 2 to 2. And to go from -1 to -6, it subtracts 5. So my change in y over change in x is 0 over -5. 0 divided by anything is 0. So that's my slope. So that first one would get you a undefined slope. The bottom one would get you a slope of 0, which means that it's a horizontal line. Okay, common mistakes I see students do. They will switch. They will incorrectly do change in x over change in y. That's wrong. Bad. Do not do this. If my students are using the formula, they subtract incorrectly, especially with negatives. Let's see, what else? How students that just mix up, like they're not paying attention, what's your y's and x's, so they just mix up x and y, the change in x and the change in y, so make sure you pay attention. And then the last thing is not simplifying, or they forget to simplify. I don't know if that's forgetting or just a lack of paying attention. So when you're done, you need to make sure, can my fraction be made any smaller? Can I divide evenly? Should this be 0? Should it be undefined? Take some time to think about that.